So we have been discussing about the reproductive system, and in class we had finished up to the menstrual cycle. So next thing we need to understand is about these hormones which are involved in the reproductive system. So they are called as the sex hormones. So there are three categories. We have androgens, we have progestins, and we have estrogen. So these hormones are required because they will help the entire process of fertilization, the maturation of the embryo, and also for development of the characteristics in the person. So out of these hormones, the androgens are found in men and progestins and estrogen are found in women. So estrogen is mainly secreted by the ovary, and small amounts it may be secreted by the testes and adrenal cortex. The most important, there are many different molecules of estrogen which are secreted. Out of that, the most important one, the major one, is called as estradiol. So the functions of this estrogen is that it helps in the development of the sex organs in women, so that the uterus, the fallopian tubes, the vagina, all this at the onset of puberty they will start developing, and it will also cause contraction of the fallopian tubes and uterus, and then it helps to secrete a liquid from the cervix which enhances the penetration by the sperm, so it allows the sperm to enter properly. Then it is also, this estrogen has another role, that it would help in development of the secondary sexual characters, like the growth of the breast, the development of axillary hair, pubic hair, the feminine body shape, and the particular behavior which is common to women. All this are because of the secretion of estrogen. Then estrogen also has the effect on metabolism, that it helps to maintain the bone mass by preventing, by retarding the process of reabsorption of the bone. So because of this, the bones will stay healthy until somebody is having estrogen in their body. After menopause, what happens to women is that the estrogen levels also start decreasing, and because of that, the bone density also starts reducing, and that is why all that body pain and brittle bones and all will start with old age. Right? Along with that, estrogen also helps to keep the LDL cholesterol at a low level, and it increases the levels of HDL cholesterol and triglycerides. The other set of hormones along with estrogen which are acting are the ones called as progestins. Now, out of all the progestin molecules which are secreted, the main one is called as progesterone, and it is secreted by the corpus luteum. You remember when we discussed about the menstrual cycle, we said that once the Graafian follicle releases the ovum, then it gets converted into the corpus luteum. So this corpus luteum secretes progesterone. Now, what are the actions of this progesterone? Firstly, it will cause changes in the uterus. It will influence the uterus in such a way that it becomes convenient, or it is favorable for implanting the embryo which has formed after fertilization. So the main role of this progesterone is that it helps in maintenance of pregnancy. Then it will also cause certain changes in the vagina and in the breast and in body temperature. Now the changes in the breast are important because it will start preparing the breast, because now once the pregnancy has happened, then at the end of the gestational period, after that 9 month duration, after the baby is born, then there has to be lactation which occurs. The milk production has to take place, isn't it? So whatever changes are required for that to prepare the mammary glands to secrete the milk, that is stimulated by the progesterone. Then it is also found that progesterone causes a slight change in the body temperature. It increases the body temperature slightly. So both these estrogen and progesterone, they were the female reproductive hormones. Then we talk about androgens. We have already discussed this in the class, I think, when we explained about male reproductive system. So androgens are the hormones which are produced mainly in the males. And out of all the androgens, it is testosterone is the one which is most important, and that is produced by the cells called as the Leydig cells. Now, the actions of this testosterone we've already seen in the class, right? So we'll move on now to the next part, which is about gametogenesis. So how are the gametes produced? How are the sperms produced? That is what we have to take up. So when we studied structure of the male reproductive system, we said that in the testis there are certain structures, tubule-like structures called as seminiferous tubules. So inside these seminiferous tubules, the formation of the sperms will take place. So sperms are also known as the male gametes. The ovum which is produced in women is called as the female gamete, right? And we already saw how this sperm production, it requires a temperature which is slightly less than that of the body temperature, and that is why we said that the testis is present outside the abdominal cavity. So this production of the sperms takes place in the seminiferous tubules. Now in the seminiferous tubules there are stem cells which are called as spermatogonia. So inside that spermatogonia, the production of the sperm will take place. So what happens is, I have shown it diagrammatically here. You can refer to the notes for that part and see it. So this spermatogenesis, there are mainly three stages in that. The first stage is called as spermatocytogenesis. The second stage is called as spermatidogenesis. And the third stage is called as spermiogenesis. Now these names are little different from each other. They are almost same, but some part is different. So please pay attention when you're writing it correctly. So the first stage is spermatocytogenesis. Now, you know that genesis means formation or production. So this is the stage when spermatocytes are produced. So one single diploid cells will be broken down through the process called as mitosis. And from one single diploid cell, we get four haploid spermatocytes. And these spermatocytes, four haploid spermatocytes, are called as the primary spermatocytes. Now, these primary spermatocytes, they next undergo the process of meiosis 1. That means that's the first stage of meiosis. So, when they undergo meiosis 1, they will produce cells which are called as secondary spermatocytes. So, when these spermatocytes are produced, the number of chromosomes in that is 23. In the diploid cell, the number of chromosomes was 46. When the spermatocytes are produced, that will get reduced to half. So it will become 23 chromosomes in each spermatocyte. Now the next step is what is called as spermatidogenesis. That means it is the generation or production of spermatids. So here what will happen is, we saw in the previous stage, secondary spermatocytes were produced. So these secondary spermatocytes will undergo the process called as meiosis 2. You remember in the first stage we said the primary spermatocyte undergoes meiosis 1 to give secondary spermatocyte. Now in this spermatidogenesis stage, the secondary spermatocytes undergo meiosis 2 and they produce haploid spermatids. So during this meiosis process, the X and Y chromosome will separate out. So X chromosome enters one spermatid and Y chromosome enters another spermatid. So during the time of fertilization, based on which spermatid is going to fertilize the ovum, that will decide the gender of the zygote which is produced. Now the next step is called as spermiogenesis, when actually the sperm is produced. So this is the final stage. In the previous stage we saw that spermatids had been produced, and these spermatids which are immature will get transformed and converted into the mature sperm cells which are called as spermatozoa. So for the maturation of the spermatozoa, we require that male hormone called testosterone. Now these spermatozoa which are produced, they are non-motile. They are not capable of moving on their own. So they are present in the fluid of the testis, and that testicular fluid will flow and carry these spermatozoa from the testis into the epididymis. And when they reach the epididymis, they will get further nourishment and they will mature further and they will become motile. And they are stored in the epididymis until the time when ejaculation takes place. And at the time of ejaculation, these sperms will get released. So the Sertoli cells which are there in the seminiferous tubules, they will give nourishment for development of the sperms. So when those matured sperm get released, that process is called as spermiation. Now we need to understand how this spermatogenesis process is controlled. So before that, just to summarize once, when we say spermatogenesis, it is taking place in three stages. First stage, spermatocytogenesis, where spermatocytes are produced. Second stage, spermatidogenesis, where spermatid is produced. And third stage is spermiogenesis, where spermatozoa are produced. So first, we have single diploid cell broken down by mitosis to four haploid spermatocytes, which are called as primary spermatocytes. Primary spermatocytes goes through meiosis 1 to give secondary spermatocytes, and during this entire process, 46 chromosomes are reduced to 23 chromosomes in each spermatocyte. Then the secondary spermatocytes undergo meiosis 2 and give haploid spermatids. And during this process, the X chromosome will enter into one spermatid and Y chromosome will enter into another one. And in the last stage, the spermatids are transformed, they get matured, and they form the final mature sperm cells called spermatozoa by the action of the hormone called testosterone. These sperms are not motile, they are carried into the epididymis. There they gain motility. Right? Okay. So now we need to understand how this spermatogenesis process is controlled by certain hormones. So we know that sperm synthesis, the spermatogenesis process, starts only after puberty. So until then, there are no sperms which are being produced. There are no hormones which are available either. At puberty, what will happen is the hypothalamus. You remember this hypothalamus is part of the brain. So at puberty, the hypothalamus will release a hormone called as gonadotropin releasing hormone. This hormone acts on the anterior pituitary gland. And because of the action of GnRH on the anterior pituitary, two further hormones are released called as gonadotropins, which are those FSH, that is follicle stimulating hormone, and luteinizing hormone. Now both these hormones have an important role to play in maturation. So FSH, the follicle stimulating hormone, will act on the Sertoli cells in the seminiferous tubules, and it will help in the process of spermiogenesis, production of sperms. The luteinizing hormone will act on the Leydig cells which are present and make them to produce testosterone, and this testosterone will stimulate the process of spermatogenesis. So this is how the hormones are controlling the process of spermatogenesis. So if in any individual there is some problem with the functioning of the hypothalamus or with the anterior pituitary, what is going to happen? This FSH and LH will not be secreted or released properly. So in that case, there will not be proper production of sperms. So that can be responsible for a delayed puberty or a puberty not occurring properly. And later on also, if there is some such defect, it can cause problems with conceiving of a child. Okay, then so that was about the male gametogenesis process. Now we come to the oogenesis, which is the production of the ovum. So we said that spermatogenesis starts only after puberty, but oogenesis starts when that what you say female fetus is inside the mother's womb itself. So at the time of 16 to 18 weeks, that is a time when oogenesis starts. Now many oogonia will be present. They will undergo the process of mitosis, right? And because of that mitosis and repeated division, millions of oogonia will be present. By the time the fetus reaches about the 20th week, that is around the 5th month, that number of oogonia will reduce to around 6 to 7 million. Then at the time when the fetus is born, when that girl baby is born, that number of oogonia will have reduced to about 2 million. Now these oogonia will undergo many different processes of differentiation, and they will form what is called as the primary follicle or the primary oocyte. So by the time the girl reaches puberty, there will be 60,000 to 80,000 oocytes which are present. Right? So this primary oocyte, which has been produced at the time of puberty, it will undergo the process of meiosis 1. The process will start, but then at the phase called as prophase 1, it will stop temporarily. That process gets arrested. That means temporarily it will stop. And all these oocytes, we said that there are 60,000 to 80,000 oocytes which are there. Out of those, about 400 to 450 oocytes, primary oocytes, will reach the next stage. The others don't go further, they fall off there only. So 400 to 450 primary oocytes will get matured further and they will form secondary oocyte. And all these 450 oocytes will be sitting inside the ovary. Okay. Now what happens is every month one of the secondary oocytes will undergo maturation and get released as the mature ovum. Okay. So what happens is all the primary oocytes are there. 36 to 48 hours before the ovulation starts, one of those primary oocytes will get converted into the secondary oocyte. And along with that, there is formation of something called as a polar body. And this completes the meiosis process, which had stopped at that time. Right? So first there was primary oocyte that underwent part of the meiosis process, but it stopped at prophase 1. Then all those primary oocytes developed further, and only one of those before ovulation will get converted into secondary oocyte and polar body. And at this stage, it will complete the meiosis process. Now that polar body has no role, so it will undergo degeneration, but the secondary oocyte will get released as the ovum. Now, once that ovum is released from the ovary out of the Graafian follicle, then it will start traveling towards the fallopian tube and it will go and sit inside the fallopian tube. At this time, when it is going towards the fallopian tube, the second process of meiosis will start. But again, that process does not complete. During the phase of meiosis 2, called as metaphase 2, it will again stop and it will stay like that. Now, this ovum, which has this secondary oocyte, which is in the metaphase 2 phase, it has stopped, it will enter into the fallopian tube. If there is insertion of the sperms into the woman's vagina at that point of time, if there is sexual intercourse which takes place, then one of the sperms will come out, which will be ejaculated from the semen. It will travel inside the fallopian tube and it will come and merge with the ovum which is sitting inside the fallopian tube. So after this fusion, after this fertilization takes place, then that secondary oocyte will complete that process of meiosis which had stopped there. Right? So after that fertilization only the meiosis process will get completed. So that is called as fertilization. So to just summarize, oogenesis is referring to the process of formation of the ovum. So spermatogenesis in men begins only after puberty, but oogenesis begins in the female fetus itself. Many oogonia, millions of oogonia are there. They reduce to around 2 million at the time of birth. Then they undergo maturation and differentiation. They form what is called as a primary oocyte. Then the primary oocytes undergo meiosis 1 but get stopped at prophase 1. Then about 400 of those primary oocytes will form the secondary oocyte. Then they will undergo further differentiation, and every month during the 28-day menstrual cycle, one single ovum will get released. 36 to 48 hours before ovulation, this primary oocyte, one of them, will convert into secondary oocyte and polar body. Polar body will degenerate. Secondary oocyte will be released out from the ovary. It will start undergoing meiosis 2 while it is moving towards the fallopian tube, but it will get arrested at metaphase 2 stage and it will sit inside the fallopian tube. After it meets the sperm inside the fallopian tube, then that metaphase 2 will get completed and meiosis 2 will also complete. So now we come to the discussion of fertilization. So we know that fertilization is defined as the fusion between the male and female gametes. So male gamete means the sperm and female gamete means the egg. So you remember we said that in the male gametes there are 23 chromosomes. In the female gametes also there are 23 chromosomes. So when both the male and female gametes combine together, when the sperm and the egg fuse together, then the 23 plus 23 from both they combine and you have the zygote which is produced, which contains the normal number of chromosomes which should be there in human beings, that is 46 chromosome. So if fertilization has to occur, then the ejaculation of the semen should take place inside the woman's vagina, and once the spermatozoa are released, they will move inside the female reproductive tract. They will reach the fallopian tube. The egg is waiting there, and the sperm will merge with that egg, right? So there are so many sperms which are released. Only about 200 will reach near the egg, and finally it is only one spermatozoon which is able to enter into the egg, resulting in formation of an embryo. Now how this fertilization takes place is shown here in the form of this picture. Later, I have also given in the notes the explanation for that. You can read that in detail. But just to understand, remember we said the sperm structure. There is a head of the sperm, there is a mid piece, and there is a tail. The tail is for motility. The mid piece contains the mitochondria which will produce the ATP, which are required for the motility, and the sperm's head contains the genetic material. It has a nucleus and the genetic material, and it also has a cap-like structure called as the acrosome, right? So this sperm will come. You can see this pink-colored structure here is the outermost layer, the zona pellucida of the ovum. The sperm has reached. The acrosome will touch this zona pellucida. Now inside that acrosome, there are hydrolytic enzymes which will help to dissolve that layer of the zona pellucida. So because of that, the sperm will penetrate inside. Then it will come further inside, and in the next layer of the ovum, there are some cortical granules which are present there, and those will cause some kind of a reaction, so that the layer after this one sperm has come inside, the outer layer of the ovum will become very hard, so that further sperms don't come. So if there are multiple sperms which are going to attack the ovum, it will not lead to any kind of a fruitful reaction, right? That condition when multiple sperms come is called as polyspermy. So to prevent polyspermy, we want only one sperm to enter into the ovum. So once this one sperm has come into penetrated into the zona pellucida, then what will happen is there is something called as a cortical reaction, because of which the layer of the ovum, the outer layers of the ovum will become hard, so that other sperms now, even if they reach there, they cannot further penetrate inside. So after this, what happens is the sperm has now come into the ovum, and the membrane of the sperm, the plasma membrane of the sperm, and the membrane of the egg of the ovum will fuse together, and the nucleus of that sperm will enter. That nucleus of the sperm is called as a male pronucleus, and inside the ovum, the nucleus which is present is a female pronucleus. So by combination of this male pronucleus and female pronucleus, there will be fertilization which takes place. So this same thing, whatever I explained just now in words, is given here again in the explanation. So first there will be acrosomal reaction, where the special enzymes get released, okay, and then the cortical reaction takes place, by which the polyspermy is prevented. So the sperm enters inside through the what is called as the cone of reception, and then the second meiotic division in the sperm gets completed, and because of that there is production of the zygote. The head of the sperm, which has a nucleus called as a male pronucleus, it fuses with the nucleus of the ovum, which is known as the female pronucleus. And because of these fusion of the pronuclei, that results in the formation of the zygote. So this actual process of fusion of the chromosomes of the male and female gametes is called as karyogamy. So once the zygote has been formed, then the protein synthesis will start, cellular respiration will take place, and after that, there is cell division which starts very rapidly within 24 hours. Now, this ovum and sperm which has merged with the ovum, this zygote is still in the fallopian tube. So, inside the fallopian tube itself, the cell division will start, cell multiplication will start within 24 hours. This kind of a multi-celled structure is what we are calling as the zygote. After 3 or 4 days, in 3 or 4 days, slowly, this zygote will travel along the fallopian tube and it will reach the end of the fallopian tube and enter into the uterus. And it will get attached inside that uterus. Once it gets attached in the uterus, we call that zygote as the embryo. And inside the uterus, we know that all those layers of the uterus is there, all the nutrients are being provided, all the blood supply is present, and slowly this embryo will develop and get attached to the endometrial layer of the uterus. So this process of attachment of the embryo in the uterus is called as implantation. Now, you remember we said that some of the spermatozoa, they will have X chromosome and some of them will have Y chromosome. Now, in the ovum of the woman, there will always be only the X chromosome. I think you have studied this before also. That in the males, there can be X chromosome and Y chromosome. Either one will be present in the sperm separately. In the women, the ovum will always have X chromosome only. So, what will happen is when you have the fusion of the gametes taking place, then the sperm, this this ovum is always having only X chromosome. So if there is one more X chromosome which comes and attaches to it, then the gender of that embryo will become female. And if there is sperm with Y chromosome which come and attaches to this, then that XY will form the male gender. So the gender of the baby actually depends on the chromosome, which chromosome has come with the sperm. So that is why if the fertilized zygote contains XY combination, that fetus turns into a boy. And if the zygote contains a combination as XX, then the fetus becomes a girl. So now the next thing, after fertilization, now the zygote has been produced. So that is the beginning of the pregnancy. So whenever the menstrual period stops, that is a clear indication that the woman has become pregnant. So generally, the pregnancy will last for a duration of around 40 weeks. And we already said that in gynecological terms, 4 weeks is considered 1 month. So when we say 40 weeks, I'm sorry, I'm saying something wrong. Yeah. Here we have written 40 weeks, so that's around 10 months. Generally, it is said to be around 36 weeks. That means 9 months. 4 weeks is 1 month. So 36 weeks is 9 months. So now these weeks are grouped into 3 trimesters. So trimester is generally, there are 3 trimesters which we are talking about here. So those during those phases there will be certain kind of changes which take place, like the first 3 months is the first trimester, and the next 3 months, and then the next 3 months. So like this, there are many changes which take place in the woman's body at this time, and hormonal changes will be maximum during the first trimester, and because of that, the pregnant woman will have many kinds of changes that she experiences. So the actual things you can read in the notes. What happens is that then in terms of the embryo's development, so the heart of the embryo will be formed during the first trimester, and around the fifth week, that means at the end of say 1 month and 1 week, that if you do an ultrasound scan, the embryo's shape will be visible. and slowly all the organs start to develop. Around the second month, the limbs will appear and the digits means the fingers and toes in very small form, they will start appearing at that time, right? Now, many times women will have nausea and vomiting during this first 3 months. Then they may have mood swings. Then they may suffer from headache, constipation, and feel very tired and all that. During the second trimester, the energy is little better. And at this time, what will happen is that the sensation of the movement of the baby will start being felt. The mother can start feeling that the baby is moving inside the uterus. Then they may feel as if the baby is kicking at times. So those kind of sensations will start appearing during the second trimester. So, and by the end of 24 weeks, the body of that baby will be covered with hair, the eyelids will start to separate, and eyelashes will start getting formed. During the final trimester, which is the last 3 months of pregnancy, that kicking sensation will become stronger. That woman may have swelling in the feet. Then she may find that urination becomes more frequent. And she may also find that there is some milky liquid which starts appearing from the breast because the breast is getting prepared for lactation. So at the end of 9 months, that fetus is fully developed, and that final stage by which the child is actually born is called as parturition. Parturition or labor is defined as the process of childbirth. So during this process, what will happen is once the fetus is fully developed, once those 9 months have been completed, then the woman will start experiencing contraction of the uterus. That is what they call as delivery pain. So once the pain starts, that woman is taken to the hospital and then she will be given whatever treatment is required. Basically, if you don't interfere with it, then the natural process of childbirth will follow. The uterus will contract and the contractions will become stronger and more painful. But that extreme contraction is required to be able to push that fetus out of the body. So it will move towards the cervix, and in the ideal condition, the head will come out first and the entire fetus will come out of the birth canal. So for the fetus to come out of the uterus, it has to pass through the cervix and then through the vagina. Last time itself, we have said in the class that vagina is the channel through which the birth takes place. So the cervix has to dilate and the fetus has to come out from the uterus through the cervix and out of the vagina. So the cervix will dilate and relax, and the hormones like cortisol will be released, oxytocin will be released, estrogen also is released, and all of them together will help in the process of labor. Like this, oxytocin has a very important role in causing uterine contractions, and also it will stimulate the production and release of the breast milk. So once the baby is born and it is coming out of the body, the umbilical cord which connects that fetus to the mother will be cut and it will be stitched up. And after that, the baby will be cleaned and it will be placed on the mother's chest so that it can drink the breast milk, and from that it will get nutrition. All along when the fetus was inside the womb, it was getting whatever nutrition through the umbilicus it was receiving, but now that that channel has been cut, it has to start depending on external source of nutrition. So during that entire phase, that woman will be very tired and she has to be given a lot of rest, and this completes the entire process. Like we talked about spermatogenesis, oogenesis, then we talked about fertilization, then we talked about pregnancy, and finally parturition, which is the process of childbirth. So that when everything goes smoothly, it takes place in a manner like this. Right? Then there are some disorders. Um, there are many disorders that can happen, but two of the most common ones that are being encountered nowadays. One is called as polycystic ovarian disease. So this is a hormonal disorder which affects many women. And in this, what will happen is there are small cysts which start developing on the edge of the ovaries. And because of that, there will be problems with menstruation, there will be problems with ovulation, and due to that, there can also be problem in conceiving a baby. And this PCOD can be caused by genetic factors. But more importantly, it is also caused because of unhealthy habits of eating, no proper sleep and rest, and most importantly, lack of exercise. So, controlling these things, it is possible to get rid of that PCOD. Infertility is the condition where somebody is unable to conceive, right? So, fertilization means when the male and female gametes combine to produce the zygote. Infertility means that does not happen. So now infertility can affect both men or women. And basically it is because the gametes are not being produced properly. So there are different kinds of hormonal treatments which are available to deal with this infertility, because we have seen how the hormones play an important role in the process of gametogenesis. So if that hormonal levels are not proper, then the gametes will not be produced properly. So if those gametes are not produced properly, then there will be no proper sperm, no proper ovum, then there is no chance of conception occurring, no chance of fertilization. The woman cannot become pregnant. So in such cases, depending on whether it is the male or the female who is having the problem of not being able to produce gametes correctly, the treatment will have to be given accordingly. In some cases, it may be the men who are having a problem. In some cases, it may be the woman who is having a problem. Or in sometimes, it may be that both are also having the problem. So either case is infertility. In the olden times, this used to be blamed on the woman. That if there is no child who is conceived, they used to blame it on the woman and say she is not proper. She is, having some damage like that. But that is not correct. Similarly, whenever a woman gives birth to a girl baby, then that woman is blamed. But already, as we have seen, it is the male sperm which decides whether that child could be born is going to be female or male. So, actually, blaming the woman for that, all these were happening more in the olden times. Now, of course, as people have become more educated, then more awareness is growing, right? So that is the entire process, and that completes our part about the reproductive system. So in the next session, we will take up this part about genetics. It's quite a lot on its own, so I will not club it with this session. So next, we will take up genetics. Thank you.